This happened to me in college, when I lived with my roommate, Michelle. It was our freshman year, and our dorm building had 4 different wings. 2 were boys and 2 were girls. Our wing was connected to another by a door down the hall, which led to the boys' wing. All floors in each wing were the same sex, and boys only had access to the girls' wing through that connected door, which you had to have a keycard for. They were locked at all times, and the keycards only worked for that specific dorm. I had known Michelle for a long time, and we loved the girls on our floor. We all hung out very often, and during the week, whoever would be home would leave their doors open so we could stop in, hang out, and whatever. We never had a problem, but sometimes guys would take shortcuts to their wing from campus through our floor. It wasn't a big deal. We got to know the guys who did this often. Most often, they all said hey if our doors were open and continued on their way. One day our friend April got quiet when there were about 6 of us in our room, and I noticed. I asked her what was up, and she said, "Dude, did you not just see that guy that walked by? I've never seen him before. He's fucking creepy and never says anything. He just stares at us." We all looked at each other and said no. She shrugged and said if he came by again, she would let us know. About an hour later, after watching some of the reality shows, she hits Michelle in the arm. We all look up and there's a tall guy with longer hair, wearing all black and walking by very slowly. He said nothing, and indeed, just stared at us. But he looked away when we all looked at him in unison. He left, and we all looked at each other. We just chalked it up to him being lost, since we've never seen him before, and resumed watching TV. I talked to Michelle later though, and we agreed to keep a lookout and let the rest of the girls know to do the same, just in case. We began to soon notice that this dude was on our floor all the time, sometimes multiple times a day. It began to get ridiculous when we would all be changing and getting ready to go out, and he would walk by about 3 to 4 times, doing nothing but staring and walking slower than necessary. Once, he even walked by 6 times, and we moved to one room and just shut the doors. He clearly lived in the building, because his keycard worked on the locked door, and he would be there daily. We began feeling uncomfortable leaving our doors open, even when there were multiple people home. We asked the guys we knew across the hall on our floor if he lived there, and apparently, he doesn't. And they seemed concerned when we told them what was going on. One of the RAs on one of the guys' floors said that if it continued or got weirder, to talk to our RA. He offered to try and find out where this dude lived for us. I'd like to say it didn't get weirder, but it did. One day I went to our dorm computer room to print off some notes for a psych class and prep a project I was going to turn in at the end of the week. That's when the creepy dude sits right next to me and starts surfing the net. As I was sitting down to do my computer thing, I felt ice cold. Everyone had laptops, and it felt odd he had arrived almost at the exact same time. I printed my shit and left very quickly. I headed to my psych class, and as I got close to the psych building, I noticed he was following me. I was stressed out the entire class and left from a different exit in the lecture hall. He was still milling around as I left, and I hope to God he didn't see me as I practically ran home. I get back, breathless, and Michelle asked what's wrong. I tell her, and she looks spooked. I go, "What?" And she shows me her Facebook. The creeper friended her, and his name is listed as Juan, and the photo is him in his underwear. I check my Facebook, and it's the same fucking thing. We knock on a few girls' doors, and 6 other people also got friended. We said nope to that, and practically pounded our RA's door down. We told the RA what had been happening, and I told her what had just happened to me at class. One of the other girls swore he followed her as well. She panicked and said not to block him online, and that she would take care of it. After that, we never saw him again. We don't know what they did, but he wasn't on our floor for the rest of the year, and never really found out where he lived in the building. Our RA told us later that there was never anyone named Juan in the entire building. It was about 2 months ago. I live with 2 roommates in an apartment complex, which has an upstairs where all the bedrooms are at, and the downstairs has a back door with glass panels with shutters on them, and a solid front door. At the time, we had a 1-year-old golden retriever, which was the cutest, friendliest dog you'd ever meet. It was about 2 a.m. coming back from the bars, and my dog was in his bed sound asleep, and I was just watching some television. That's when I heard one of the back door handles start to wiggle. At first, I thought it was just one of my roommates coming back from the bars, but I remembered that they didn't go out because they had exams the next day. Now, usually my dog barks at any movements or sounds by the door, but since he was sound asleep, this first sound only alerted him to wake up. I asked who was there, and got up and checked, but nobody answered. Later in the night, I heard a sound from the front door, and then my dog barking his brains out. Let me tell you, this dog is friendly, but he is one big pup, and that bark is literally painfully loud when you are near. So I check downstairs, and see that the door is cracked open. I run downstairs to open my dog's crate when he was sleeping in and grab him and yell, "If you're out there, you better back the fuck up, or else my dog is gonna have a word with you." I walked him over to the door to see that no one was there. I closed the door and deadbolted this time. All in all, I slept downstairs that night with my dog to make sure that nothing funny happened. I assumed that the intruder was just trying to steal things, since if he simply wanted to break in, he could have smashed the glass from the back doors. The next morning, I was leaving to go to the library, and that's when I closed my door. The damn doorknob came off of the outside half. This fucker unscrewed my damn doorknob to get into my house. Fucker must have been as quiet as hell. Moral of the story? Big dogs are the best, and guy trying to break into my house? Let's never meet again. As of writing this, it is around 3 a.m. in the morning, in Ghent, Belgium. I'm a college student currently living in the city. I tend to make most of my student life while at the same time keeping things calm by often throwing small parties or get-togethers with my friends. They're usually at my place since they all have roommates and the like. Today, or better said, yesterday, since it's past midnight, was one of those days where I would throw a little party. I invited around 4 friends for dinner and drinks, and we spent most of the evening and night talking or looking up bullshit videos on YouTube. Eventually though, starting at just after midnight, the party began to end with people slowly leaving until only me and a female friend remained. She always leaves last because she's afraid of walking home alone in the middle of the night due to a bad experience with a drunk creep who followed her a while back. So every time after I invite her over, I walk her home. I enjoy walking, and the entire trip usually lasts under an hour. Nothing ever really happens. Ghent is a lovely city, 90% of the time, and the trip to take her to her place takes us basically right through the center. This time was different though. After 20 minutes of walking, we passed a little park by the waterside which I refer to as Dreidel Park, since there was a massive stone dreidel, that's the key feature of the park right in the middle of it, to commemorate the Jews that died in World War II. Normally, there's nothing here during the night. When the sun's out, some students smoke pot here, but once it gets dark, the place is usually completely empty. Well, almost anyways. This night, a man was standing next to the public bathroom by the side of the park. He was dressed in a strange suit with black pants, a black vest, black shirt, and a white tie. He was tall and had broad shoulders, yet, oddly enough, his arms and legs seemed extremely thin for the aforementioned shoulders. He had brown hair of medium length and held a chain of keys in his right hand, twirling it around his fingers and catching it in his palm again and again. At first, I thought he was waiting for a friend to finish his piss and move on. But once we got close enough, I could see the restroom was completely empty. The fact that he was simply standing there, seemingly wasting his time twirling his keys, I found odd enough. But what was truly unnerving about him was his stare. At first, I couldn't see his eyes since it was dark, but I could see that he was staring right at us. When we were close enough, I could see his unflinching eyes relentlessly gazing at us. His right eye ever so slightly bigger, or better said, more open than his left eye. It was subtle, but it gave his gaze that extra nudge on the creepiness factor. When we passed him, I could feel his eyes on my back as we walked away. I didn't think much of it after the initial encounter, and simply dropped off my friend and retraced my steps back to my way home. When I made it to the park, however, he was still there. I didn't see him at first, but that sound of him twirling his keys echoed ever so slightly throughout the street, and I knew that if I passed the restroom, I would see him standing there. Sure enough, there he was, twirling and watching. Again, I passed him, not even acknowledging his existence this time, and simply kept walking, eyes on the road. But again, I could feel him watching me. After about 20 meters, the sound of his keys suddenly stopped, and out of curiosity, I looked over my shoulder to see why he now decided to stop, considering he had obviously been doing that for a while. He stopped because he had began walking in my direction. I didn't think much of it at first, since, like I said, the trip took me through the center, but I crossed the street since I did feel a bit uncomfortable. As I kept walking, I occasionally gazed in the windows of shops and stores to subtly look at the reflection behind me, and every time I did, he was still there. In truth, I didn't really need confirmation. I could still feel him watching me. I have to cross one of the rivers that runs through the city twice on my road. I can't simply keep following it, since the streets don't accommodate for that. The first time on the way back, the road across the bridge actually leads deeper into the center and heads for the center proper. The second time, you're actually leaving the center to the point that a 1-minute walk will lead you to the outskirts of the city, which is where I live. So, when he followed me across the first bridge, I didn't think much of it, but the second time, I started feeling the chills. The moment I walked down the street that basically exits you out of the city and realized he was still following me, I began to quicken the pace in the hopes of losing him. But as I said, he was tall, and every regular step he took basically was 1.5 steps for me. When he noticed I was trying to lose him, he was closing the distance between us, and that's when I heard him humming this accursed tune, with a high note, a lower note, and the same high note, then a short pause, followed by the same 3 notes, much slower. Then the same 3 notes, like at the beginning, followed by 2 lower notes, with the second one being even lower than the first, at a slower pace than the original 3. He hummed this tune over and over and over again, to the point that I now can't get it out of my head. I decided I shouldn't let this guy know where I lived, so I went down a different street to take him in circles, hoping that I would eventually lose him. I must have walked in circles for about 15 minutes, him constantly behind me, before he eventually stopped humming and began giggling. And I don't mean laughing, I mean actual schoolgirl-esque giggling, followed by him saying, "I love games." His voice was deep, but not in a creepy way, more soothing. It was heavy and bass, but like in a blues singer's voice or perhaps jazz at times. It was in fact so soothing, it actually made me uncomfortable. Despite what he said, I think he must have been tired of my games, for now he rapidly approached me. He didn't run or jog, he merely walked faster than me, until he last stopped, closing in mere centimeters from my back. I could always feel his eyes, but now I could feel his breath as well. The gust from his breathing moved the hairs on the back of my head and neck. It was a fight or flight moment at this point, and I chose to flight. I ran like a bat out of hell down the street and praised whatever god was listening at the time. I was a fairly decent sprinter and managed to outrun him by some degree. I guess his fancy suit shoes didn't work well in terms of athletics. I was happy that I could outrun him, but the reality of the matter is that I have close to no endurance when it comes to running, so I was quickly tiring. I ran back towards the city center, which at that point wasn't far anymore. And the moment I came close, I saw a train waiting at the station, ready to leave. I jumped on just as the doors were closing behind me and gazed at the lights on the door button until they went out, which meant that the doors were locked. As the tram slowly started to go, I looked up and saw him standing at the station, gazing right back at me, with a faint smile on his face, keys in hand, twirling, and while I couldn't hear it, I was sure he was humming that damn tune over and over again. I truly hope I never see him again. It was approximately 1:45 in the morning, and all of a sudden, I was woken up by some pretty heavy knocking on our front door. I leaned over to see if it had woken up my boyfriend, and he was still asleep. I got up out of bed to glance outside, and the way our bedroom windows angled, I couldn't see whoever was standing on our front porch. I decided to wait a second to see if whoever it was would just leave. But the person began to knock again, and even louder this time. I'm talking heavy, loud, fervent, hurried knocks. And they were just getting louder. I woke up my boyfriend, who immediately grabbed a pipe that he kept next to his bed. We were just quiet and waited. And then all of a sudden we heard this guy walk around the side of our house, his footsteps crackling on the gravel, to the back where we had the fence open. Shit, I thought, what the fuck is this guy doing? He began banging loudly on the back door, which mind you has glass in the middle. This is so loud, I start to really worry. I grab my phone and preemptively dial 911. I ask my boyfriend, who is now peering out of the back window, what this guy looks like and what he's wearing. My boyfriend responds, he's wearing all black. And at this point, this man starts yelling, "Let me in!" This was said in such an alarming and loud tone that it really freaked me out. We could hear him banging on the glass and jiggling the doorknob. At this point, I decided to call 911. The operator sounded very alarmed. "Do you know this person?" With which I replied, "No, I haven't opened the door to politely ask who it is." Meanwhile, I'm thinking, what the fuck? What if this guy breaks into our house? What will we do? Is my boyfriend going to have to hit him? Is he gonna get hurt? Not fun thoughts in the slightest. The police arrived in 2 minutes or so. There were a lot of fast responders in my town, which I was grateful for. The cops knocked on our door and showed us this guy's ID and asked if we knew him. Of course, we didn't. Then the cops said, "I think he's just drunk and stupid." So basically what happens is, this guy is super drunk and seriously thinks that our house is his. I mean, wow. Talk about an honestly dangerous situation. I'm just glad the ending turned out okay. All in all, I had no idea what to expect. Let me just start out by saying that I'm a 5-foot tall female. I have a baby face that gives the illusion of sweet innocence, mostly. Forever looking like a preteen is advantageous. Sometimes, though, it makes you look like an easy target. This is the first of many encounters I've unfortunately had, and the one that sticks out the most. I was 17. I worked at a local grocery store in a small, mundane town. Being a high school student, I worked evenings and got out around 10:30 p.m. I walked home alone every single night, and I had worked there since I was 15. It was my area where I grew up, so I had no fear of it. Thankfully, though, I was still on high alert. Anyways, on this night, I was about halfway through passing my local 24-hour convenience store. I always became more alert at this point because, until then, I was walking on a well-lit main road, and I could probably motivate my stubby little legs to sprint to the store if anything had happened. After that, it's small residential roads with many a dark place to hide. For myself, or murderers. I walked past the store and noticed a few cars parked outside, nothing out of the ordinary. I crossed the street and descend into the dark residential area. It's worth noting that not many cars really drive down those streets, especially this late at night. As I'm walking, I see two really bright lights roll up behind me. Obviously, a car. It was honestly not super strange at this point. I keep walking, but I turned my head to try and see what the car looked like or who might be inside. I couldn't see shit because this car's lights were super bright. But I sped up a little bit, but this car kept slowly following behind, creeping closer and closer. I was fully shitting myself at this point, but it didn't quite break into a run because it's still a ways to my house and the car could easily catch me. This may seem stupid, but I watched a lot of those animal nature shows, and the one thing they always say is a trademark of prey is running. I guess I thought if I walked confidently enough, it would scare them off. At any rate, there was a corner coming up onto a very small road that led onto the street that I lived on. So I decide not to go into full-blown panic mode unless this car follows me down this street. I quicken my pace, turn the corner, and look back. The lights are finally out of my eyes, and I can sort of see the car, and it stopped where I had turned, and I absolutely shit myself because I remember seeing that car parked at the convenience store, and to my absolute horror, the car turned slowly on my corner. I freak out and scramble to find my phone, but I fucking forgot it at work like a moron. So I pull out my iPod Touch and pretend it's a phone, to at least make it seem like I'm talking to someone. I turn around, iPod to ear, and looking at his car dead in the windshield, lights still blinding me, and throw it the dirtiest look I could muster, breaking into a slight jog. I hear the window go down, and this motherfucker starts cooing at me, like some really lifelike dove noises, and I just fucking book it. I hear the car speed up behind me, and as soon as I round the corner to get onto my street, I dive into one of my neighborhood bushes because I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to my house before the car caught up. I sat and waited. The car came slowly around the corner and stopped just ahead of the place where I was hiding, and the man continued cooing. I was prepared to sit there for the whole entire night because I was pretty convinced that they didn't know where I was. A couple of tense moments later, the car just suddenly took off. Never have I ever been so relieved. It was dark, so I didn't catch its plate numbers, and the worst part about it was that I saw the car switch off its high beams. All I could think was, they must have been turned on purpose to blind me. I stayed hidden for a bit because I was afraid the car was just lurking outside. Adrenaline took over though, and I just started sprinting home. I got in my house and just started bawling my eyes out. I was absolutely inconsolable, hyperventilating, fully shaking, dry heaving, the whole 9 yards. I had never been so afraid in my entire life, and it wasn't until I got home that I fully started to register that fear. After I calmed down, I called the police, but nothing happened. I didn't have a very good description of the car besides its color and the make, and I never saw who was driving. The most horrifying part about this whole story isn't what happened to me though. The reason why this story sticks out in my head is because not a month later, a young girl who was very drunk was snatched from the side of the road about 10 blocks from where I had been walking. The guy took her and raped her for 3 days in his basement, but she managed to escape. The house she was being kept in was abandoned, and the guy was never caught. There is no way to know for sure if it was related, but I shudder to think what might have happened if I had not dove into that bush and been super alert of what had been going on that night. So very long short story, creepy cooing fuck in the blue car? Let's never meet again.